You're listening to the Deep End Podcast, a ministry of Hermitage Church, where we have a conversation about Sunday's sermon and chat about ways we can go a little deeper in our faith. I'm Hunter Steinmetz, and I'm one of the pastors here at our church. Every week, we will listen in on a conversation with the preacher from this week about deeper theological pieces of the sermon and suggested practices on how we can embody this word and allow it to seep into our skin. We hope that this podcast will become a part of your weekly faith journey on your drive into work, as you do the dishes, or as you sip your coffee on Tuesday mornings. Thanks for jumping into the deep end with us. Let's listen in on this week's conversation. Welcome to the Deep End. I'm Hunter. I don't know if you've ever heard of me. Yeah.
And I'm Brad.
Hi, Brad. Today we're working out of Acts 16.
Yeah, and it's an interesting passage. It's Acts 16, 25 through 34. And it's this interesting passage where Paul and Silas find themselves in jail. And it's kind of interesting, the story that led them up to that point, which we'll retrace a little bit, and kind of what was the reasoning for that. But it's really, they find themselves in jail, and it's their posture once they find themselves there. And it's a posture of praying together. It's a posture of singing, and kind of this dramatic earthquake that happens, and how the doors that they're imprisoned in fly open.
And then the story gets even more interesting. The jailer, who was watching them, almost takes his own life, and then ends up getting baptized that night instead. It's this really cool, powerful, lightning bolt kind of story. But today we want to spend, Pastor Matt, when he preaches on Sunday, will spend a lot of time in that part of the story and how it relates to worship in that moment, and how worship can't be stopped. But in the podcast today, we want to spend more time on why did they find themselves in prison in the first place, because we're jumping into that story. So we're gonna talk more about how they got into prison in the first place, because that's kind of sets the stage for everything that happens next.
Yeah, and the story that leads up to that kind of culminates in Acts 16:16. Paul and Silas are in Philippi, which is a Roman colony. There's kind of a whole backstory as to how it became a Roman colony, but that is an important piece of the story. And it's a city that prides itself on Roman identity. So there probably are many retired Roman soldiers. They are probably governed by Roman law, and it's this kind of Caesar-like loyalty. In a way, it's like a little version of Big Rome.
Yeah, and in that context, Paul meets this young slave girl. And we have to remember, too, that Acts is written by Luke, the same author as the Gospel of Luke. The Acts is intended to be read as volume 2 to the Gospel of Luke. And so Luke is telling us about the slave girl, that she has a spirit of divination. And in Greek, it literally means a python spirit, which in this Greco-Roman culture, it meant that she was believed to be inspired by Apollo. And so people would come from all over to pay to hear her fortune-telling for their life.
Yeah, and in the text, she's being exploited from kind of her owners. She's a victim. She's spiritually oppressed, and in a way economically trafficked, and she's making a lot of money for her owners, which is very good for them, but it's very difficult circumstance for her. And Paul, they kind of stumble up onto this scene where they just kind of come into contact with her and her owners, and he ends up getting frustrated at them.
Yeah, and it says that Paul was greatly annoyed, so we're not really sure if he was just tired of hearing, "These are the servants of the Most High God" on repeat, or if he finally snapped at the injustice of what was happening. But either way, Paul cast out the spirit of this young girl.
In the moment he does that, he's not only cast out the spirit, but for these people, he's disrupted their economic structure, so their means of acquiring money. Her owners end up getting mad, and it's not because she was harmed, but because their profit is gone.
And it's interesting because this is what gets Paul and Silas arrested. It's not because they have bad theology or different theology. It's not because of what they're preaching. It's not really like disturbing the peace. It's because they they started messing with the money, and this is even something that like we're not really foreign to in today's world either. You mess with people can bypass a lot of issues, then you start messing with the money, and all of a sudden things become really problematic. So it's interesting that the reason we can think a lot of times, well, they were against the gospel, or they didn't like what they were doing, so they imprisoned them. No, I mean they cast this unclean spirit out of this girl, and she wasn't making her owners of a human being, her owners, money anymore, and so they threw them into jail.
Yeah, which leads them to do just that. They are thrown into jail. Paul and Silas are kind of dragged to the magistrates, who are the powerful in the time. But the charges are interesting. They don't say they healed our slave and now we are broke. Instead, they kind of turn the issue and to kind of their ethnicity. These men are Jews, and they are stirring up trouble.
Yeah, it's kind of the like dog whistle politics. It's this they point at their race rather than what they've done. It's kind of this ethnic bias, the civic fear, maybe, but even just power dynamics. When powerful people lose their ability to become powerful, then it really shakes things up. And so, Paul, who actually is a Roman citizen, is called Jewish, which he also is, but they really focus on his Jewishness here, and really try to hammer that home to punish Paul and Silas. And so now they're both without a trial, and they are beaten and thrown into the inner prison. And this is one of the things that we kind of were doing research on, that, and Paul talks about this later on when he is in Jerusalem, that it's illegal in Roman law, it's illegal for a Roman citizen to be beaten or thrown in jail without a proper trial. And so they bypass all of this, which will come up a little bit later. But it's really important to know that they're not given a trial and simply thrown into prison, because the powerful people with all of the money, who are now losing money, they're really pressing in on Paul's Jewishness and saying, this is what this Jew has done. Do something about it. So without a proper trial, they throw them into prison.
Yeah, and in prison, it's kind of where the story begins to flip. Around midnight, Paul and Silas are singing together, they're worshiping, and they're praying. And
I don't think that for them it's just personal piety. It's resistance against the systems of oppression, for both to them personally in that moment, but also to the people like the young girl who they came into encounter with. As they sing and worship in the prison, they're proclaiming freedom even while being chained up by the very empire that they're coming to try and dismantle.
Yeah, that's really intriguing, and it's interesting to contrast it with the owners of the slave girl that got them there, because they're in prison and they trust God for provision, but the slave girl's owners have lost their provision and cause them to go to prison. It's just this interesting kind of contrast, like the disciples trust God for the journey and what will be provided, even when they're thrown into prison and chained. It's just really intriguing. So, in the midst of their singing, there's this massive earthquake. The doors end up flying open. Their shackles kind of just come off. And instead of running, Paul and Silas stay put.
And obviously, when you read the story, this is the biggest surprise in the whole thing. The jailer wakes up. He thinks that everyone has escaped on his watch. And, come on, it's an earthquake. He didn't cause an earthquake. But I suppose it's because he was sleeping on the job. And he's ready to take his own life, thinking that everyone has escaped on his watch, because Roman law would have held him accountable for all of the lost prisoners.
And then Paul yells to him, "Don't harm yourself. We're all here." And in that moment of mercy becomes the turning point. The jailer asks, "What must I do to be saved?" And before this, we were talking about how, you were bringing up the point how this act could have gone a lot differently. Like Paul and Silas
probably should have.
Yeah. And how the people that were involved were kind of brought into the story, and how that connects to holiness. You want to share something?
Yeah, it's really interesting to me, because And I don't even really mean this as like taking God out of the picture and just the human response to an earthquake. I even think of even the way that we understand holiness sometimes, that if you believe that you're like a Paul or a Silas and you're in that and really believing that this is what God has called you to do, that you have been put into prison unjustly. I was just helping this young girl. We saved her from these oppressive people, and we were thrown into jail for that. That if there was some divine earthquake and the prison walls have opened, I think that even a God-fearing understanding of this would be, God has saved me from this unjust thing that has happened to us. Now we're free and we are escaped. Who cares about the Roman jailer? And yet, it seems to me that the holy life is never is meant to just land for me. Like I'm not too convinced that the jail walls, when they go down, was for Paul and Silas. I think it was for the jailer. And even Paul and Silas's obedience to God, in those moments when God rescues them, he's not just rescuing them, he's rescuing the jailer. All because they rescued the girl. So it's really interesting to me, that holiness not be something that it's not personal piety. They weren't singing so that everyone would know how great Christians they were. And that when the walls fall, their immediate response, because they knew the mind of God, was not, God has done this for me, let's escape and get out of here well before the others come. They sat still and said, hey, don't do that. We're not going anywhere. We're here for you, which is just so fascinating to me.
Yeah.
They should have run.
That's true. It pushes back too up against our individualistic understanding of society, and it goes towards even like some of the Old Testament stories. Like it's always for others. Thinking of Moses being called by God to go and free this group of people who are enslaved. Like it's not just for one person, but it's always for the people around us. But sometimes we have I guess our mind becomes dim to that reality.
Like the work that God does in Moses is not for Moses. It's through Moses for the people of Israel. And in the same way, like what's happening in the jail is not, I mean, sure, like Paul and Silas leave and go, wow, that was an incredible moment. God saved us from that. But I mean, they didn't budge.
Yeah.
I mean, they were probably a little bit terrified when the wall started coming down, make sure a rock didn't fall on them, but the fact that their minds were on the jailer, who was probably not fond of them, and they weren't fond of him either. Yeah. So it's really fascinating to me that they don't budge, and when Jesus says, pray for your enemies, and love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. This is exactly what they end up doing, which is it's a really beautiful outplaying of holiness, in my opinion. And I think it keeps showing up more and more and more that whatever God is doing in us is never for us. It's for our neighbor or our enemy. And we have to understand it as such. And I think that we should notice here too, like the salvation for the jailer is not just he goes to heaven when he dies. Like eternity is good for him now. It is in that moment they were enemies and they were being persecuted by this jailer. But what salvation means in this moment is healing. It means restoration. It means reconciliation. And it's so interesting how then this plays out, that the jailer brings them to his house. He washes their wounds, and he's baptized that same night. Like this is not the way this story should have played out. In any good war movie, this is not how it ends. A good war movie is the jailer his name is just the jailer, and they run past him, and you don't see him ever again. Yeah. But God cares about the jailer, and he has a name, and God knows it.
Yeah. So there's kind of a thinking of the big picture in all of this. Paul and Silas are jailed because the gospel disrupted an unjust economy. But instead of seeking revenge or escape, they respond with worship and mercy towards the people around them.
Which, to kind of go back on what we were just saying, I think that the response should either be smack the jailer on your way out
Yeah.
because you you were
Yeah.
unjustly put there, or just run straight by him.
Yeah.
He's a nobody in the story, and yet that is not the way the kingdom of heaven operates.
No.
The kingdom of heaven operates in a way that the jailer matters to God.
Yeah. It's a different story. It's a different way of seeing the world. I think, and I think too, in that moment, they were sensitive to the Spirit when all of this is happening, because a lack of sensitivity would have caused them to move towards self-preservation, which would have been run past the jailer.
Right.
We just have to save ourselves. But their sensitivity caused them to turn. I was thinking, like, there's so many moments throughout the day. Say you go, like, I was at the dentist the other day, and it's so easy to judge people. First look at someone you're judging, kind of making quick judgments. But the story that we're a part of, our first look at someone should be child of God. So if you're sitting in the dentist waiting for the dentist to come and call you back, and someone comes in and is like saying, I just moved here from Austin, Texas, or moved from somewhere else to Nashville, and they talk about how they're struggling or something in their life is not going well, it's having the sensitivity to say, okay, mercy in this moment, instead of just a kind of passing a judgment, turning the other direction. I think of how many moments throughout the day there are times when we could have a Paul and Silas outlook that would cause us to lean in more, maybe ask a follow-up question that could cause someone to find that healing, reconciliation, and end up finding wholeness.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't mean to turn your story into some like huge existential crisis, but if you're to bridge those gaps, we see all the time. Like, you never know what it is people are going through. And there may not be some earthquake that saves you from jail, but sitting in a dentist office, the person that just moved here from Austin, Texas, that walks into the dentist office may be like the jailer and thinking of taking their own life.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's extremely existential and a really big, morbid example. But the fact that, like, hey, I'm right here.
Yeah.
We're all here. We're here. We're here with you, and being present in that moment. And I think even one of the things that you said in the very beginning of that was they could have moved right past him in self-preservation. And I think that's one way, but I even think that there's another way that we can convince ourselves that God tore down this jail for me to run out of it in this moment.
Yeah, it's a way of relating to God. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's possible that we could have left the jailer there to take his own life, and who cares? He's a Roman who just imprisoned me. And we could have understood. We could understand the earthquake as God saying, "Get out of there now!" Before it maybe not even self-preservation. Maybe it's like God ordained preservation, and we could totally miss the jailer that's sitting there, and that's the reason that the earthquake happened. That's the reason the jail fell. Is for the jailer who finds salvation in the Lord. It's such a beautiful story that is some. I mean, I also understand it's a really hard thing to, like, how do you know when to run out? Like,
so
God's
true.
like, why did you stay there when I tore the whole place down? But they knew.
Yeah.
They knew, and they stayed, which is such a beautiful story. So, both the exploited slave girl and the jailer, this is kind of the heart of what Paul and Silas are doing. These are two people trapped in two totally different systems and bound by those different systems in the world. And both of them are set free by the gospel of Jesus Christ, by the faithfulness of Paul and Silas, the work that God had done in Paul and Silas's life.
Yeah.
That did cost them something, but also set others free. This is a huge part of this story.
Yeah, which is good. It is good news for us.
Yeah.
And it causes us to confront systems that can hold people down. It causes us to see people who are raised different. And it then causes us to offer kind of hope and healing.
And sometimes might get you unjustly thrown in jail.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's what happened in the story.
Yeah.
By sticking up for people against unjust systems.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating to think of that, and how, like, they were like, it's okay. Because they knew God. They knew the God who held the world. They knew the God who in the beginning was was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. They knew Jesus, and they knew that wherever their life took them, there's this deep peace
Yeah.
because it's not their story.
Yeah.
It's God's story.
And I mean, this is not even that far removed from our own like political history in the United States, the mid 1900s, even the civil rights movement. That there are a lot of people who are unjustly thrown in prison for confronting systems that were oppressing people, and sometimes there were metaphorical earthquakes. Other times there weren't, and people died in prison. But there is a time for this, and I think that what holiness is that God is doing this work in us, and sometimes following Christ may cost us things when we and it's also to say that the systems of the world are powerful. They're like the evil systems, and if you follow the money, sometimes they're powerful systems that ultimately have no match for Jesus Christ, and we hold that dearly. But I think it's a reality too.
Yeah.
So I think this is the slave girl and the jailer, the two people who are set free by the gospel. That this is what Luke wants us to see.
Yeah, there's that this is kind of like that. It's not about just personal belief, but it's about confronting these systems that can hold people down. Yeah.
And so I guess the question for us as we finish up today is, if the good news that we preach and that we hold on to so dearly never costs us anything, and maybe never even disrupts anything, then are we preaching the same gospel that Jesus lived and Paul preached? And if not, maybe we have to name the difference to figure out what gospel it is that we have come to believe.
Yeah.
And I think that Christ will help us to know that and to live into it.
Show us the people. Give us eyes to see.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us this week, as always, and we'll see you on Sunday.